Welcome to episode 272 of Control the Controllables. And today's guest is Christian Harrison. Christian comes from a big tennis family. You will know his brother Ryan Harrison, the 2017 French Open doubles winner and former top 40 player in the world. And his dad, Pat, has coached many players over the years at the famous IMG Tennis Academy in Florida. Now, Christian has had a year that I think all of us in the tennis world are a little bit in awe of. You know, himself and Evan King have come together playing the Challengers at the start of the year and made their way all the way to the ATP Finals in Turin. He's a delightful young man. I loved having the opportunity to talk to him, and I know you guys will too. Pass you over to Christian Harrison. So, Christian Harrison, a big welcome to Control the Controllables. How are you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be on. Thanks for having me and looking forward to the talk.
What a pleasure to have you on, Christian, and a big well done on a fantastic 2025. You know, making year-end finals, eating burrata for fun in Turin is a nice way to end the year.
Oh, it was crazy. You know, obviously started the year, you know, where the rankings were at. You know, you don't even have a set partner going into, you know, this time last year. It's just about getting into tournament. So then to achieve a milestone like that, you know, it feels surreal. But then at the same time, from the competitor side, you're always looking, you know, how can you build on it?
Absolutely. And do you know what? It's a funny one because when I was with Mike Venus and Nikola Mektic at the start of the year in Auckland, obviously they were due to play you in the final with Rajiv, you know, and obviously your ranking was down at about 85, I believe, at the time.
Yeah.
And not many people will know this, but Rajiv pulled out of the final.
Yep.
But for the centre court crowd, you guys played a practice set,
Yep.
A demo exhibition match, and you played with a young kid from New Zealand, a decent player, but not of the level of you boys. And I remember watching, thinking, either my boys aren't playing great here, or this kid's bloody good. I remember like you just rocketing balls back, and actually I blame you for that partnership, the Mektic Venus partnership, because actually like they won the tournament, but they came off losing the exhibition set 7-6 to you and some unknown New Zealand kid, and I don't think it ended up being the best preparation going into Australian Open, which was then not the best preparation going into the rest of the year. But little did I know it was actually down to your quality at that time, because I saw that the rest of the year as well.
No, I mean Michael's like my older brother, so I was honestly just trying to just hit him with any kind of forehand or backhand I could rock it at, and it was hot, so the balls were moving. But no, we had it was an Oklahoma State Cowboy I was playing with, and it was fun. We were playing great that day, but it was fun to do the exhibition. But yeah, you know, for me it started there, you know, because Raj and I were able to make the finals, and then that actually allowed my ranking to go up to, you know, get a partner that was around the same ranking as mine. And, you know, Evan, I guess, became available at that time. And I knew that he had a lot of game. So then I was able to jump on that as soon as he was available.
Well, look, we'll jump into a little bit more of this year after. But where I want to start, Christian, actually is 198 in singles, career high, 15 in doubles. That number's important. We might get to that number also later in the podcast. The question everyone wants to know: who makes more money, the singles player at 198 or the doubles guy at 15?
Yeah, doubles for sure. You know, doubles. I was at least from, but it's different for me though. I don't because when I was 198, prize money was, you know, was a little lower than at times, and it just at 198 also it depends on, did you get into the slams? Did you win your matches at the slams? Did you get all your points from the challengers? You know, because a couple of times I had, you know, qualified at slams, and then those prize monies went up, and then made a bit more. You know, I got one of the years had qualified and won round at Wimbledon, so then good paycheck from that one. But that was a year they didn't have ranking points. So then, you know, so then didn't even get to get like any benefit from that. But yeah, for me now, the stability that I've been able to provide for myself at 15, I would have to say 100%.
And in terms of which one's more fun, Is it more fun being a doubles player playing the biggest events in the world, or a singles player playing maybe the slightly lower level events?
Doubles for sure. I mean, it's getting to the bigger tournaments. I think that's the goal. However you get there, playing those tournaments and just being there, on the biggest stages and playing. For me, I would take it every day of the week, which is why I made the switch into doubles and started doing that.
So there's a theme here. I'm going to stay on this for a little bit longer because I've got a couple more things.
Yeah,
And the next question I want to ask on that is around, and I guess it's a little twofold. When I say
yeah.
which one is viewed as more successful, I'm talking about almost how the tennis world would view it. But then I'd also like to ask that from how you would view it. And has that changed? Would you have viewed that differently when you were playing singles to now the fact that you're playing doubles in terms of which
No,
one's more successful?
yeah, no. So there's sometimes I guess a bit of like dilemma on it, rivalry, but obviously where you're at in doubles being 15 compared to 198, the recognition that I'm getting just from casual tennis friends, people around my area, the clubs, when you go to, obviously being 15 in doubles carries a lot more weight even compared to 198 in singles. Just for me, even growing up, we were always taught, my dad always had us play singles and doubles, so you would always put pride into both. And I think just from the last few years or so, there's just, I wouldn't say a stigma, but there's just like a rivalry on, should you try to make it in doubles or singles, in longer. And, because sometimes the so-called double specialist, I think sometimes that's where, I don't know, players have a hard time with sometimes, but I think that's just more that all sorts of different kind of players are just wanting more prize money at the end of the day. So then it becomes just something that it's just taken out on, like on
Yeah,
so-called doubles players and doubles specialists. I don't take it as a personal attack because I think that, you know, just growing up, being a singles player at first, where were younger, you had ability in game. My brother achieved so much, but I don't think there's ever been, a time where to look down upon guys playing doubles. I sometimes just think that that's frustrations from other areas. That's just an easy way to vent it, that players are just wanting more.
yeah.
That's how I look at it.
And in terms of, obviously, you'll get, I don't want to
Yeah.
jump in that too much. It's been spoken about a lot. We've spoken about a lot on the podcast.
Yeah.
I don't want to bring the negatives too much, but you do get your booblick. So you get these comments that are
Yeah.
made. But do you, I guess, just from like a professional standpoint of, and anyone that's seen you around the events, you're the ultimate professional.
Yeah.
You're on the practice court, you're taking care of your physical, you're absolutely putting the work in. Is there sometimes I think there's a sense that people think it's easier to maintain that level of being a top 20 doubles player than it is, let's say, to be a top 200 singles player? Would you say that's accurate? What's your take on that in terms of kind of the work that goes in around that from a physical standpoint, but also, I guess, from a match preparation standpoint, a watching film standpoint, a number of hours on the court, all of those pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that it's easier to make because there's still, players that are trying to not take your spot, even in doubles. And, it might like there's a lot of guys I know that are top 100, top 200 singles, and they have their little routine that can maintain, and I don't always think that their routine is more than what other doubles guys or doubles specialists so called are doing. There's less movement that goes on into the matches, but nowadays I feel like there's so many more guys specializing and playing doubles that are playing it the right way, that the skills that go into mastering it, you got to really be doing it every day because you know there's just there is fewer spots in doubles, like in terms of just how the ranking is required to
Yeah.
qualify for tournaments, that that you got to make sure that you're staying sharp enough. And whether it's the top of singles or top of doubles, there's always going to be some guys that just have the ability, just because they've done so much to get themselves that good, that then they know that when they can take off and maybe do a little bit of less and maintain their game. But I find it's pretty similar on both sides of the tour.
And I always think the the word humility is very important for all tennis players,
Yeah.
right? And we take like an Austin Krajicek, who Austin's
Hmm.
a good dude, puts the work in. He was world number one, and then all of a sudden, 10, 12 months later, he's almost outside the top 100.
Yep.
Lamans, he's dropped out. He's gone from being kind of a number 10 in the world, number 15 in the world, whatever it might be, to being 130. Still putting
Yeah.
the work in. I know his is a little bit more injury related. That spot's not there forever, right?
No, not at all. That's why I think players are aware that, you know, and that there's a lot of guys that are there playing. There's no easy matches, and it's just the right promotion. There's going to be negative stuff here and there, but I honestly, to simplify it, I think it's just players want more from a single side. They feel like they have the most weight on it. It's shown and televised more, and they're just looking for ways to try to get more. So then sometimes it's just taken out on in different areas.
So I'm now going to go to where I normally start, Christian. So I normally start with my guest on their, I guess, their journey into tennis. How it gets into your blood. There's a lot of common stories. There's common stories of my parents a coach. You might know that one.
Yeah, of course.
I live near a tennis court. I live near
Hmm.
a tennis club. You come from quite a famous tennis family. Your dad Pat, is very well known and has worked with many players over the years. I haven't had the privilege of actually spending time with him, but I've heard nothing but amazing
Yeah.
things about your dad. Your older brother Ryan, who's Ryan Harrison, who has been top 40 in the world in singles, had a fantastic playing career. Certainly the Brits out there will be hearing him on Sky Sports over the last
Yep.
few months as well. And then also your sister played
Yep.
to a good level as well. So take us back, Louisiana, and that's a big connection of ours. We've just learnt that your financial advisor was my old doubles partner at LSU.
Yep.
Louisiana, Shreveport, Louisiana. You know, go back to that time. Not really a hotbed of tennis, Louisiana. How were your early years, and how did that tennis bug start for you?
When I was growing up playing, it seemed like finding an academy once you got to a certain level was like the way that most players who were going to be serious about their game were doing. My dad obviously taught, played, so I was lucky that you could grow up around it, develop a passion just from literally going to work with him. He was a coach, so just grew up going to the courts with him. And then once I was 10, Ryan was a couple of years ahead, 12. You're doing well at national tournaments. You get offers from academies. It seemed like it back then when we were younger. This is 2004. There was a handful of academies that were starting to open up. Everybody knew Bolletary, Everett. John Newcombs was the one that was in Texas that just happened to approach. My dad knew them. One of the guys that was the director at the academy. And once we just felt like we needed more players, that was when my family decided to relocate to Texas. And the years kind of go by quick, once you start playing it, and it seems like you kind of grow up. And that was just, yeah, literally how we went from place to place, and then just always loved it. So then just I was lucky that I always had a good support system, and
Yeah.
family that was involved. It's hard, tennis is a very tough sport if you don't have a parent or someone close to you that's there with you, especially if you don't have the financial backing to pay for coaching and stuff, because it can be very expensive. I think that's why a lot of the players who are pros had someone that was a parent, family member, or close friend that was a driving factor to their
And
success.
how important was it to, when you look back now, that the family stuck together? Because I think that's one thing we see a lot. Like I've got a tennis academy in Spain, and I often get asked that question by parents, like, is it better that we come, or is it better? And I always say, absolutely. The more normal you can have
Yeah.
your away from the tennis court, the better. But obviously, not all families can move in that way,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of people. So how, because you've always struck me as someone, and I've got to know you better the last 12 months. Someone who's very much got your head screwed on, very in whereas a lot of tennis players can be, have these kind of wild
Yeah.
minds. Maybe how much do you attribute that to the fact that the family was able to kind of move together and stick together?
100%, like obviously if you can balance that out, I don't advise anyone to go away from their family. Like I think sometimes that's the mindset I'll hear from some like random coaches and like people in the sport that I just think is just misguided. I think trying to get, because if you're a coach and your family's going to be involved, they make just as much sacrifices as the player does through the years, and they take it as emotionally. Sometimes I think that's frowned upon, but I don't agree with it. You're gonna care about your family members, and tennis is a tough sport that it's year round, so you're just forced to do it even on the days that you don't want to do it. So I think sometimes that's just, you know, when players are, struggling emotionally, which is just going to happen in this sport. It's just kind of, oh, I was forced to do it, or, but you're sometimes, I think you're just forced to do things. But I still believe that the passion is always there for those players. Otherwise, they just wouldn't have been able to put the time to get as good as they were, if they
Yeah,
weren't enjoying it for those days. And then the only time though is I think sometimes it can be a negative, and that's up to the people to find their balance. Is it's very easy to emotionally vent, and it's easier to do that when your family is there because those are the ones you vent to. So then when they're your coach or somebody that's close to you, I think it can negatively impact the player's development because you spend so much time and frustration because you've just gotten, to where you almost vent too much. So I would say that's the toughest like thing to navigate, but you always got to have, especially if your family's close and involved and like that, it's going to be a positive. And obviously would never recommend people getting away from their family just to
yeah,
say, oh, you need that to be successful. Or once you turn 16 or 17, you're at those teenage years, then get away from your parents because that's when you're going to fight with them. I just think that that's just misguided.
and has your dad coached you all the way through?
Yeah, 100%. Like I've had other people here and there that will travel because he doesn't always travel, but for me, I mean, I would have just given from my background, I spent so much time just away from the sport with various injuries. So then for me
Yeah,
to just have a support system and somebody close to you like that, is always there when you need based on certain days I would have never been able to financially provide.
yeah,
And, so then for me having that, it's, you know, you'll see players sometimes complain that their parents, their coach, but then when they sit there that they don't really realize the financial cost of things because you've never really had to do that. Then you realize that okay, like I got it pretty good. I need to stop
yeah.
complaining. It's okay to vent, but like you get used to venting almost too much.
And how did you guys navigate those junior years, kind of those adolescent years?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the hardest thing about it at that time when you're like younger and you're trying to like do it is the outside voices of people in the sport that are always saying that that would never work and just giving their opinion on it. And anytime you like have like a fight or an argument with your dad or something, it's like, okay, here it goes again. This is why it doesn't work. So then that stuff I think can sometimes play with players. I mean, our thing is you just try to forgive a lot. You're both going to make mistakes as you get older. I mean, Ryan was 2 years older than me. Like he had other people coaching him as he was 18, 19, 20. So then just because it was just, yeah, like I said, it was sometimes just battling with dad and coach, and then sometimes needing new voices here and there. And then also, I think some of it's just outside influence of listening to, people that don't always no, not to say that's what happened there, but I see that happen to like a lot of other players, I would say. And then I think sometimes it's okay to be stubborn and just, your parents are going to be the ones that are there for you no matter what. There's a lot of great coaches out there who are like that, but there's also a lot of really bad ones who are just there passing the time. And then so then when you're really passionate about the sport, you can spot that pretty quickly. And it's also really tough to find good coaches who the players really trust. So I think now I see so many people where the traveling schedule is tough, and for me, you see players struggling. I think it's because they maybe part of it's just finding like a good support team. It's really tough to find that with somebody that you're traveling with all the time, that you're paying, and then, because there's a lot of coaches that I find that players just have a hard time connecting with, that have been there with them, the whole time, where they feel like, okay, like if I wasn't doing well or doing this, like would they have my back,
Yeah.
sort of energy. And I think that your parents are always going to have that, even if they're making mistakes themselves. So I think that doesn't always get talked about.
And what makes a great coach for you?
For me, it's just somebody that will put the player first. Obviously, it's when you're on the road, you put the player first, because obviously emotionally there's a lot of stress that's going on that the player's feeling, so then the player has to feel okay about being a little bit selfish. Sometimes for me it's not always about the forehands and the backhands. It's somebody that's just honestly just wakes up with a smile on their face and just loves what they're doing, isn't there to just pass time almost, and just get there to enjoy. You can find that balance between the player and the coach. Everybody's different in what they need, but I think for the coach it's understanding the player that they're with, and then just making sure that that the player's taken care of with what they're looking for each day. A lot of, like, for me, mine is just, I like to practice, so my needs are just, it doesn't matter if I feel like if somebody's telling me wrong things on forehands, backhands, volleys. It's just, let's go to the course with a smile and
Yeah.
enjoy just being intense and practicing. Like, I love playing. Somebody else, it might be, what they need, an hour and a half, but making sure that the player is engaged, and you're practicing with intent to improve, as opposed to just saying that we're going to do it. And it sounds easier said than done, but just getting out on the court and going, what, like, hey, like, let's warm up, and then let's improve something today. Like,
Yeah.
let's work, and let's make some mistakes and be okay with making some mistakes and practicing some stuff that we're not good at. Just instilling that in the players, and having maybe just a coach that really reinforces that behavior. And then I think that as a player, you can really trust the person that you're with, because you feel like they're taking it as emotional. They care as much as you do. So then the days that it's not going well, you can really, where you need guidance and you need somebody to listen to, I feel like it's just so easy to just be like, man, this person's there with me and they're really trying their best, just like I am. I trust their opinion from the outside, from what we're trying to do, from the conversations that we've had. They've listened to what I've had to say. They know how I'm thinking and feeling. So now I trust their input back and forth. And I feel like that's just how a great player coach relationship bonds, to where then it's just like for me, yeah, I think that's like just very important.
But do you think, Christian, in terms of what you're saying there,
Yeah.
which I think you've described very well, that's a traveling coach with a pro player. How much do you think the skill set is different from a coach that's needed on the tour with a player to what's needed from a coach in those kind of informative years growing up as a junior?
Hmm.
And I guess my take on that is why it is quite difficult that we don't see that many stories of a
Hmm.
coach sticking with a player all the way through that journey, because
Hmm.
maybe the skill set shifts as you go into different stages.
Yeah, there's always, I feel like the skill sets, the technical thing. I honestly, for me, I think technique is very overrated from what I've come to know. I think technique has changed with generations. I was actually on the court thinking about that yesterday, and I'm like, there's so many pros now that are playing with technique, and the way that they move and hit open stance backhands, and just move around the court. Their forehands are coming out this way, like when we were younger, and coaches would say, "Oh, you can't. You have to play with your racket face open. If you turn it out, you're going to be losing time. You can't."
Yeah.
Step out this way and do certain shots. For me, I think, like, obviously it goes. You got to learn the right, skill, the technique a little bit, but I think just like, honestly, just practicing with intent to do things. I guess, like you said, that's more on the coaching side. For me, the development and the skill set, that stuff that is developed, from when players maybe start playing, that are on tour at like 8 years old, 8 to 12 to 13, 14. By the time they're 14, they start catching things a little bit easier. If you tell them a technical adjustment, on the volley to shorten up, it's a little bit easier for them to grasp those things, that you shouldn't have to just sit there and tell them every day for 3 months, like, hey, this is how you need to hit a volley, and like shorten up. I think a lot of times, like, their volley might not be perfect, but if they're just, doing it and getting like the little cues and things like that, then they start to get it, like they by that time they have the skill set to get it. So yeah, I think, yeah, but for me, I'm like, there's no one way to do technique, to do all
Yeah.
these different shots that we sometimes like instill that you have to do. But sometimes I'm like, and I think like I've spent a lot of time like trying to work on a certain technique throughout my life that tons of pros are doing now, that they've just, proven that it didn't have to be that way. But also from a coaching standpoint, it's understanding like when's the game changing, and when are some of these certain things on how we were taught, like, how important is it, or how, like, because then sometimes I feel like I've held myself back by not doing what's coming natural to you,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
sometimes that's also very important. Like if somebody's not, if they're doing something well, but it's not necessarily like the right technical way to do it, I would say maybe don't spend so much time changing
Yeah.
it. That's probably the simplest way to put it.
The way I always think of that
Yeah.
is stylistic versus functional.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think as coaches, it's very especially people that coach where it's we almost coaches that aren't in the tournament life, that aren't traveling
Yeah.
to tournaments. It's almost like coaching becomes the sport, or hitting forehands becomes the sport, and
Yeah.
it's like they can then obsess over a certain style.
Yeah.
It has to look in this very stylistic way, but obviously there's certain functional things that you want to make sure kids at younger ages have that aren't going to hold them back, but allow that authentic style and natural way that the player has. And I think that's the trick, really.
Yeah. It's like if you watch how Medvedev's technique happens,
Yeah,
and you're like, you know what, if he would have spent all this hours trying to like get that out of, like, how he could have wasted a lot of time maybe changing that could have hurt him. But then it might be different if it comes to a time where somebody like has been successful, and then all of a sudden they feel like they're not playing as good as they once were. Then it's like, okay, like I feel like I've been better. Now is the time that you open up into changing something. Then you might look at changing technique or making like an adjustment to something, because you feel like it's become like maybe a hole in your game at that point. But if something's like not necessarily a hole at that time, then sometimes you can throw yourself out of whack by trying to
yeah.
make too many adjustments with what's been said to be right or wrong on how to play.
Yeah. Well, like Alcaraz, I think Alcaraz, I don't know if it's been talked about or if this is factual, but it looks to me like Alcaraz made a bit of a shift technically on his backhand last year to to be a little bit kind of straighter back a bit early, not quite as high, to almost be able to maybe deal with the faster ball and be able to get through it a little bit, but for a very specific reason, to function in the way that he wants the shot to function. It
Hmm.
just doesn't necessarily look better, or it's not a style thing. It's very much that he wants to do. And I know same Holger Rune on his forehand, made a bit of a shift on his forehand because he was, and that all links into the data that these players are getting, right. You're losing the forehand to forehand battle against Casper Ruud, or you against these
Yeah.
guys. We've got to do something now to be able to repeat with quality, to be able to do it. So these players are adjusting, but they're adjusting in a functional manner, right.
Yeah, and it's not something maybe like, hey, change the grip or change this, like technical things like that. Maybe it's something where it's like come lower, go straighter with the, like, Alcaraz adjustment you said might have been like what, straighter with the arms and maybe a little lower, you
Yeah, that's
know.
what it looks like to me. It looks
That's
like
what
he's
it
done
looks
that.
like.
Yeah. So rather than he was going a little high, and then
Yeah.
he like kind of lost a
And
bit of
then
the
I'm
loop.
like, somebody else might come and say, you know what, he got a little bit more like bend in the elbows, and it helped him, stay shorter on it. Then you can just, extend the arms and accelerate. And you're like, you know what, that also like makes sense to me also, so then
Yeah.
that might be something for him that we don't know. We weren't there, but he just said, you know what, this feels more comfortable. So like, I'm going to stick with it, because then also too, it's like we were always taught, hey, like have like the elbows like slightly bent, because then you can just like turn and like
Yeah.
extend them. But then a couple players just start doing it with, their arms a little straighter. Novak, maybe when he turns, it's like a little like straighter at times, but then you're like Serena seemed like she was a little like that. So then you see somebody just being like so successful doing that, where you're like, you know what, that works, you know, because then there was a period of time where it was like just get the racket back quick and then just go forward on it, you know. So it doesn't matter how you get there, just get around to the point of contact. So then it's like whatever allows you to get there faster. So then find your way to do that. What's more comfortable for you that way?
And I think the
Yeah.
other one that we don't talk enough about in our sport is, I guess there's like this conform technique that everyone
Yeah.
talks about, but it's actually about adaptive technique to the
Yeah.
tactical situation. Anyway,
Yeah.
you know, you guys are always, but in a natural way, you'll be naturally adapting
Yeah.
what you're doing with your feet, your body, and your racket, depending on the situation you're in,
Yeah.
and depending on the situation that you're trying to achieve as well. We can get a little locked in. I'd love to, as much as I'd love to go down that rabbit hole even further.
Yeah.
I'm conscious that I'm not going to have you for hours and hours, and I want to get into some other things. And the one thing as we're talking about you growing up, you obviously Ryan, who is a couple of years older than you know, he was number 8 in the world juniors. You know, obviously went on and had his pro career as well. As the younger brother growing up, was there a rivalry there? You know, we talk Andy Murray, Jamie Murray talk a lot about that. You know how there was that helped Andy a lot because
Hmm.
he had this older brother he was trying to get after. Was there ever a period where you felt you were in his shadow a little bit? You know, because Ryan, even I remember being at LSU in Louisiana. And people were talking about Ryan as a junior, right? You know, and that was
Hmm.
back in like 2000, 2001. You know, as he was starting to come through. And there's a younger one as well. You know,
Hmm.
was kind of
Yeah.
the how was that for you growing up in terms of rivalry versus living in the shadow versus having an inspirational figure to look up to?
Honestly, I would say it was neither. Like no shadow, no rivalry in terms of like animosity. Like the way we were, I mean, we were very close family no matter what. So anytime he would do something well, like or if he didn't do any like play well or win a match, I feel like I would hurt more than he did sometimes whenever he lost a match, just
Okay.
because I feel like that's just how much we were taught to care about one another. And for me, it was just nothing but support always. But it was always a very good objective of something to look up to, especially if he did something where it was like, okay, he's doing it. Like we're doing the same things every day. So then when you're younger, if you're like it's working for him, then there's no reason why it shouldn't work for me. And so for me, it was always just anytime he would do something, it would be like that. That's the reason on why it can be done. You know, we're same coach, same family, you know, everything. And then so any kind of success that he would have, like I almost felt it as well, because it was just I feel like that's how close we were and that's how bad I wanted everything for him to go to come true as well. And so for me it was just nothing but support all the time.
And what about your sister as well? Who, you know, she went on played at Mississippi State. You know, where did she kind of fit into that dynamic?
You know, she loved playing, but I feel like she loved tennis more once she started looking at colleges, and then that gave her something like I don't know if it was just because we were boys and going to work with my dad all the time, and you know, obviously he would push us very hard, and he always had a hard time pushing my sister because he felt like when she was younger that she just didn't like it as much as we did, so he just that's what he always told her. He just didn't push her as hard. But she loved playing, but she just always had different goals, you know. I think from a younger age, Ryan and I, we wanted to dedicate ourselves from, you know, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to it every day. And
Okay.
that's just, you know, sometimes like what you have to do. But she was probably the best athlete out of all three of us, I would say, in terms like she's an unreal athlete. So she's always like, man, I wish I would have like, you know, pushed through it harder, because like how once she started taking it more serious in her junior year of high school, she was able to like get like to a D1 SEC school, which was like her goal ultimately. And then but we always took it, especially my parents, just the same as well, especially once she started, you know, really caring emotionally about it more and more. You're going to naturally care more as a sibling as well. But yeah, for her, she just, when she was younger, she just yeah, she just didn't want to play as much, I would say.
And then yourself, Christian, and obviously the family as well.
Yeah.
You talked about the move to Texas, but
Hmm.
I guess the almost the higher profile one, and the one that we know you for. I'm talking to you, and
Yeah.
you're only a mile away from that site right now, right?
Yeah.
Is Bollettieri's. I think it
Yeah.
was, it was the place in the world, right? It was the place in the
Hmm.
world where the tennis mecca. It
Yeah.
was it was where everybody talked about. Nick was kind of the almost like the first big superstar coach.
Hmm.
He talked big, he looked big, he acted big in every way. He had the stars, Bradenton. So what took you guys there? And that was, I believe, you were about age 14 at that time when you made that move.
Yeah, honestly, it was something that my parents were trying to figure out the best thing to do. A lot of these parents are sometimes learning what's to do. They make big decisions to relocate their family and themselves. And at that time, we had signed with IMG, and it was just what they felt was best for us in order to be around more players and more competition.
So IMG
And
had taken over Bollettieri's at that point, had they?
yeah, at that time,
Okay.
Balotelli's name was still on the tennis branding side of it. So when we got here, we called it Balotelli, and everybody's like, "Oh, well, it's IMG. Balotelli's the tennis side of it." Because at that time, I didn't know that. I just knew that IMG was connected as it. So then it was just once we signed with IMG, then our manager at the time, Ben Crandall, was living here in Bradenton and was like, it'd be great to come around here with a lot of great players. All the clients, are here. You can train for free, have all the facilities. Nick's involved at that time. Nick was here pretty much every day at the academy, and you'd see him all the time. And obviously, his reputation, you could go on and on how great he was. But so it was just a way to just come and be around more serious tennis players and people that had dedicated themselves and were passionate about it as we were. And my parents and us, we just trusted that it was going to be the right spot. That's ultimately what brought us to Bradenton.
Tell us about Nick. I was telling you off
Yeah.
air, Nick Bollettieri, our,
Hmm.
God rest his soul and bless his soul. But he was our 100th episode on the podcast. Such an incredible honor to kind of sit across a video call from him, and just even at that time of the age that he was, he just oozes aura. He oozed so much that came through. Tell us about some of those experiences. Maybe share a story or two on Nick.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Nick, you'll see a video of him talking now on Instagram. Could be a video from 30, 40 years ago, something talking to Andre or somebody, and he just has a way to somehow just make you feel connected. It always feels like he's talking directly to you or something he's saying you feel like you can connect with emotionally. Nick, it's you would never know what he was going through personally or anything like that because he just as soon as you would see him, he just had an ability to make you feel like you were the most important thing right then in that second. Ask you, what's going on, how you doing, what can I do for you, and then whether it was something good, he'd make you feel better. If something hadn't gone good, tournament or something else, if you could felt like something else was bothering you, he just had a way to be direct and ask, and make you feel comfortable to share things with him. And he just, he had a way to lift you up, and I felt like that's why so many people respected him all the time because it didn't matter what was going on with him personally. He just felt like, he wanted to be there for somebody else. And I felt like that was just his gift. And he learned to share it through tennis initially. That gave him, a lot of power. And I think that's why so many tennis players, used him and why they respected him so much is because I think he initially understood that. And then he was able to just find all sorts of ways to just connect. He would speak West Point. You could go on and on naming it because people just realize that he had something to say and he has a way a passion that a lot of people can appreciate. And I think passion in anything is what people respect the most. They can
Oh,
recognize that in somebody else, and passion, work ethic, and selflessness. I think those are qualities that Nick had, and I think that's why so many people respect him and why he's such a legend, and he'll live on forever.
and was he able to have that impact across the environment at IMG? It's Bollettieri's for me. It'll always be Bollettieri's. You know,
Yep.
was he? When you went, I would imagine in the earlier years for sure it was kind of him, right? And I don't know the guy, but I know Red. You know, everyone talked about
Yep.
Red, and there was kind of two or three of his people that seemed to be able to kind of spread that. Was he, as IMG got bigger? Was he still able to have that impact across the environment, or did that start to dissolve a little bit, almost as it became a little bit of a bigger machine, really?
Yeah, so when we first got there, it was, I guess, IMG Bollettieri. It was like, from how I know it, I might not even be telling it exactly, but Bollettieri was the side, like the tennis side. And, it started as tennis, and then I think that IMG took over, and then they started to expand it into other sports, but then they still want to use his name from a branding for the tennis side of it. So he was always involved, at that point. Whenever it didn't matter, like even once it officially became IMG. I mean, Nick had such a just aura about him that no matter where he's going, if he's talking, people are listening, people are paying attention, and just feel, honored to be around him. And I think how most of the true tennis players knew it growing up was it was Bollettieri, and he would have all these great players, that he was coaching, and they're all at once. And then I think at a certain point, just more academies like were opening up, so then players started just naturally like spread around a little bit more because there used to be, Nick was, the one that started it. Almost seemed like academies, and then people were like, you know
Yeah.
what, that's a great idea. This guy like almost pioneered something here. So players started to spread around a little bit more. But no, Nick never lost his, ability to take command, or even here on the grounds, like if he was walking around, people were always paying attention, and he always knew exactly what he was doing.
And you, when you look back at your,
Mhm.
you've still, you've, if you want, you've still got a long career ahead. You know, if you're going to be
Yep.
Rohan Bapana, you've got another 14,
Yeah.
15 years.
Yeah.
So who've your big influences been, and what are some of those philosophies that were ingrained in you an early age or mid age?
Yeah, I mean, my influence was always just, my dad.
Yeah,
If you're gonna do something, be passionate about it. And I got a passion for tennis from a work standpoint. It's just what I love doing. I would never see myself doing anything else. And I just wanted to play as long as I could to make a life out of it now. And whether it's singles or doubles, like honestly, the passion for just going out there and practicing and playing, for me, is never going to change. So for me, it was always like pretty simple because I just love doing it.
and when you talk about your dad, so this is Pat, Pat
Yeah.
Harrison. Before you guys moved to Bradenton, was your dad working with high level players? I know he'd been a coach and he'd done, because it feels like once you at IMG, he still works at IMG now, right?
No, he's got
No,
he's not he hasn't been there since 2020 actually. He
right, okay.
started yeah, he
He
started he's just got his own, like, not just program. He just started teaching privately.
right,
Essentially,
okay,
there was a couple players that wanted to hire him privately. That just as he was getting older, we Ryan was getting towards the end of stopping playing, and then I was looking to switch into doubles. So it just seemed like, it made more sense for our family than at that
yeah,
time. So he started. He
okay.
still coaches in the area, but it's just strictly,
Okay, but it's
private.
but it seems like, certainly from the outside, that
Mm.
he's also made a bit of a name for himself as a coach and developed that. Was that something that came more when he moved to Bradenton, or was that something that had been happening for years and years before?
I would say more in Bradenton when it became, because he had never worked with pro players before we got here. Or
Okay,
even he had always worked with, Ryan and I, and then just top junior players. And then when we were in Louisiana, it was just strictly like adults and almost beginners.
okay,
He had a decent program, but it was no players that were making an impact on the pro tours, ATP, WTA. Once we came to Bradenton, and obviously just from where he had helped Ryan and I get from the junior rankings. obviously that just something that gives validation to where other players like, okay, like let's work for these two guys. You've coached your kids, and at that time, then you start hitting with other players, and they like you. So then that's how his reputation started to develop because there's so many players here, and then he was always free to hit with anybody, and so then anybody that wanted to hit with him and coach, that's how he started working with so many other players, and then obviously players are going to stick with who they like to work with. So then that was kind of how his coaching side of it started, and he's gotten the reputation he has.
Great family move. It seems
Yeah,
like.
exactly. And his thing is like even now, I mean, he just turned 62, and I'm texting Ryan today, like, got to figure out a way to get dad off the court so much, but he just won't stop. Like he went 7 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. today, just with only a 30-minute break, and on the 30-minute break, like he was watching me hit, like because I'll hit next to him on the court,
Yeah,
and he's only stopping at 5:30 is because it started to get dark at 5:30, like, but that's just how much he loves just being on the court,
amazing.
like, and I'm just like, but you can't, and that's obviously I think too why so many players liked working with him and being on him, because no matter what, he was always going to be switched on and engaged and just love being out there. And I think that that's just something that's just, if you're going to be a coach in tennis, you know you can be a really successful coach, I find, by just, even if you're sometimes saying the wrong things, but you're also openly like willing to change something when you've been proven wrong. But it just, if you just love being out there, and players feel like they can also, because sometimes I feel like players want to talk to their coach and prove them wrong sometimes, and then just have the coach be like, you know what, like that one, what I was saying is right, but it doesn't work for you. So I'm gonna listen, and then let's just adjust, and then if the player might come back, all right, I'm just being, I don't know, it's just things like, there's just simple things I think in coaching that people love, like, and he's always found a way to get along with players and everybody he's working with and have a good time doing it. So then I think that's I think that's why he just likes being out there so much.
But it's exactly the impact. There's something that the
Yeah.
reward of impacting people is massive, right? And there's no
Yep.
greater gift than passing on that passion to somebody else, and it comes through in you, And
Yeah.
actually, a little story with Ryan, and I spoke to Ryan about this, but last year at Wimbledon, it was that kind of rainy Wimbledon
Yeah.
2024, and it was Danielle, wasn't it? Danielle
Yep.
Collins he was with, yeah. So we were the secret of Wimbledon. That's no longer a secret because I've talked about it too much on the podcast. The indoor tennis center changing rooms.
Yep.
So when you're a male coach of a female player, you know, Mike and Mector were always too tight to give me a credential, so I always would have a credential from Gabby and Erin. So I'd be the
Yeah.
male, so that meant you couldn't get in a locker room at all these big events.
Yeah.
But at Wimbledon, you've got the indoor tennis center, so that was often where Ryan was as well. So it was kind of hanging out with Ryan quite a bit. And Danielle was playing a match, and she was 4-love down, maybe in the second set. Anyway, and he came in and he's like stripping off. He's stripping off, and I'm like, what's happening, dude? He's like, she's playing terrible that night, but she's getting on the court indoors now. And he's
Yeah.
like taking his clothes off, and he's like getting suited up, and he comes back in 20 minutes later, dripping in sweat,
Yeah.
and he's like, I've really I've gone through her here, but I've gone through her with tennis. Like we've hit. I've gone like side to sides with her. Like we've got her moving, and we're going back out there on the court now. And we put it on in the indoor tennis center, and 4-love became 4-1. 4-1 became
Yep.
4-2, and she ended up winning the set 6-4. And
Yep.
then he walked back into the locker room, and I had a little word with him and said, "Look, it was so impressive to see that as a coach you were like getting down and dirty with the player, and but that what I'm trying to connect here is it was interesting that was Ryan's way. That was Ryan's
Yeah.
way with a top 20 WTA singles player. That seems to very much be your way. When I
Hmm.
see you, I see you're on the court. People love practicing with you because that there's fire coming, right? You're not
Yeah.
holding back. The intensity's there, and that's your dad's way at 62 years old.
Yeah.
being out there on the courts, and it feels like the gift that he's passed on to you is in not do as I say so much, but actually do as I do, which
Yeah.
is the more powerful way of passing on a message.
Yeah, and sometimes, yeah, and I remember that day too. And then sometimes too, everybody's different, but and I think too that goes back to how well that he knew Danielle, and like from a coaching relationship at that point, I think it was like he knew that there was stuff going on with Danielle that like that day, like she was comfortable to say like she had some stuff going on and she was just not ready. She didn't want, and so then like the warm up and everything was like not good, and she started off like 4-0 down, just was not ready to go. Luckily, it was a rain delay, and I remember because I sat next to him in the match, and then he went. And he's like, "Yeah, we just like hit," and I like got her like warm. And then she came out and played some of like the best tennis I've seen. And that was, at times it's like I think sometimes you just gotta like go for it and love being out there too. But also as a coach, like that's not always gonna work for everybody. And then realizing like when's the right time to like switch on and go into that mode, and then when's the right time to back off because the player needs it. And I think that's like one of the most important factors in coaching that you can sometimes only get with experience. I'm sure
Yep.
you know.
And linking that into to your journey, your injury journey, and forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but
Hmm.
uh, 8 separate surgeries between
Yep.
2009 and 2018. Left femur, right hip, left hip, right shoulder, right wrist, right adductor, left adductor, and left femur.
Yep.
8 surgeries, 9 years, and there's I don't know if I've missed any, but how have you coped with that? But I guess before we jump into that, is your way of training, your way of is how much of that do you think is linked to the fact that you just almost overloaded the body because it was your way that you did it?
Yeah.
What was the story there on why so much of that happened, and then how have you mentally coped and had the resilience to
Yeah.
come through all of
Well,
that?
honestly, this is one of the times where I say as a player, it's like to be stubborn. It's like, because yes, I like to work hard, but I know my injury stuff, like 0% of it had to come from my training. Because I just know that, like the first surgery I ever had was a bone infection that was just a fluke thing. Like that, it
Yeah,
wasn't even like sports. And then the reason why I had so many surgeries was because I went in for like literally just like a minor adductor, like hip strain that probably didn't need surgery. And it was after because I played Isner in the summer, like in Atlanta, where his serves bouncing even higher than like it always does,
yeah.
apparently in Atlanta. And so after the match, I was like, man, I've like gotten like a little strain in my adductor. That was how it started. And then it just so that strain just became you know what, like I did an MRI on it that you got a strain. And then I was just connected because at the time signed with the academy IMG, and that where they connect you with just all sorts of doctors that are top notch. And I was connected with this guy who was supposed to be like the best hip surgeon. And the problem is, just think he thought he was like maybe like too good, and ultimately it was my fault. But I went in for like one little hip operation, and then they're like, you know what, like let's do both because we will just make it better. And then, hey, is anything else hurting you? And I was like, well, I never miss time. Like sometimes just my shoulder's a little sore. Like I would have
Only in
never.
America, Christian. Only in
Yeah, I was just
America.
like, you know what? Like I would have never gotten my shoulder checked, but they're like, yeah, let's just do it. You're doing an MRI on your hip. Everything's right here. This is like the best care. They're like, yeah, you got something going on your shoulder. You might tear it, when you're like 23. You're doing your hips right now. So, like, let's just take care of this. And then by that time, you've gone one hip, and I've done two additional surgeries now that I wouldn't have even done. And then that's when problems really start to kick in because you've got atrophy. I'm rehabbing. I haven't even hit a ball. I've like torn some ligaments in my wrist because my muscle had atrophied from my shoulder surgery. And then they tell me that they've made a mistake, that I didn't need the hip surgeries, that I should have just done the adductor surgeries. And because it like caused like more problems than was ever even there in the first place. So then I ended up with the adductor surgeries. So then I ended up like having all these sort of surgeries I just never would have like even had. But I
It
do think
sounds like when
sometimes,
you go in for Botox and you come out with
yeah.
your lips done and then you got a boob
So
job before you know
yeah, like
it.
ultimately, and you're like, and it wasn't as bad as it like seems, because like I mean, I always had a great time. Like I made like the rehab in those days fun, and like just always like couldn't wait to get back to playing. So like I always found something that like I would look forward to. But at that time, like I was having all these surgeries and I wasn't even like really training, you know? And then I think it was just like honestly just the fact that like I love playing and working so hard, which is why I was able to like push through that. Cause then when you've had surgeries like that, you're gonna have setbacks, you're gonna have aches, and you're just gonna like
Yeah.
feel like off. Like even now, I'm like I can't lift my shoulder like certain directions, like but it's just like my you find a way to work around it, you know, and you like I don't know, like and I feel like that's just why like I was able to always like keep pushing, because like you know you'd have a setback and you keep pushing and you find a way and you adjust, and then yeah, I would spend a lot of time on it, but I also felt like that was what I needed because I missed so much time that I was just like, you know what, like I missed a lot of time on the court in those developmental years. It's the most important years of a player,
Yeah.
because ultimately those are the years that you can improve the most, that you can then see a lot of the game. Like sometimes I'll see players like I feel like they got to 20 years old, 21, and they just got so good at that age, and then they just felt like they just knew how to just maintain, and you know, and then they made a career out of just like knowing how to maintain themselves and just feeling good on the body standpoint, and that works for them. So you're like, you know what, like that's great, that's what they're happy doing. And then there's other players that you know they weren't maybe as good from those years, and then that was you I feel like I missed a lot of developmental years there. And so then I felt like I needed to figure out a way to improve, to give myself a chance to be good enough to somehow make it in the sport.
Do you think that stopped you being a top 100 singles player?
The which part? The
Your body ultimately, I
oh, the
guess.
body? Yeah, the body 100%, because I just like I can't put a ranking goal on it or anything like that, because then you just like I feel like that just is always going to sound bitter. But I mean, I got to 198, and obviously your ranking was held back no matter what, because you just weren't playing consistent, you know, like, and ultimately because then at that point like I felt like, you know, most of the time when I was playing, I would come home and it was like I would have a hard time, like if I played two or three tournaments in a row, coming home and like doing anything but hitting, you know, just stationary, you know. So then I felt like I wasn't able to have really training. It's like I would spend time on the court, you know, hitting a lot of balls, but then like the match play and all that sort of stuff, like I would spend a lot of time not really doing it, but I would, you know, but I would find ways to hit, you know, and play. But then when I would go play tournaments and I was running so much side to side, then that's where I would then break down, because I was
Yep.
going into so many more stretch positions that I felt like if I was training for all the time in those positions, that then I would just get injured too much. So then I was actively just always training at like 70%, because I felt like if I was like pushing harder than that, you know, like then I would break down. And for me, 70%, like I'm still putting time into doing it, but I'm just not like going side to side and doing, I'm still like, you know, just stationary more so and
Yep.
just spending time doing it. That was the way that I learned to adjust, but I felt like I was at least improving forehands and backhands and shots and repetitions. So then that was what I felt like, because I felt like if I wasn't doing that and I wasn't able to really play matches, then I wasn't going to be very good anyways.
Did you have any moments of darkness where you were thinking of stopping?
No, never stopping, because I felt like I would always, you know, I felt like I was young enough at those times and I loved it enough, and I felt like I had done well enough to at least see a little bit of progress to want to keep playing. But I did know that like when I like won the first match at Wimbledon in 2022 at the Slam there after I had qualified, I knew that that was going to be the last significant thing I ever did like in singles.
Really?
Yeah, because like at that time, like
That was over Jay Clark, huh?
yeah, and
Yeah.
I just knew that because like I was struggling. Like if I didn't win the third set, like I was gonna retire. Like
Yep.
like at that point in the match, like I was really struggling to move. I went up two sets and I stood up after the third, and I just couldn't stand on my foot. Like I'd had some plantar fasciitis going on for a while that
Yeah.
was coming and going with some pain, and then it just like got very severe. Like we had a long break after the second, and then you know I was kind of like feeling it a lot through qualies already, but it was manageable. And then there was just a movement I'd made at the end of the second that I felt didn't feel good, and then I had a little piece of the bone chip off, like a little cavity, almost like
Okay.
not like a fracture, but it was like some damage to the bone as well as the plantar fasciitis that I was feeling. So then I like when I played that match, like I knew. So that was like the one moment where I knew that, you know what, and for some reason, like I always thought I was gonna feel bad about stopping singles, and I just always felt like at peace with it, you know, because I honestly, Michael Venus is my closest friend in the world, and I've seen what a great career he had, and I
Yep.
knew that would be something to strive for as well. If you know, if I wasn't able to play consistent, and you know, so I ended up having to pull out of my next round match, but
Okay.
I just felt like I don't know. I felt somehow like even at peace with it, and I was just like, you know what, like I missed a long time after that. I took a protective ranking. 2023, I played a little bit of singles, but you know, like I knew I wasn't training and really playing for it, so I knew that that was going to be that I was going to start looking at going into doubles then, and
Okay.
that was what I did, and I always felt at ease with it.
And you mentioned Mike. We've mentioned Mike a couple of
Yeah,
times. A legend. If you're listening, Mike, we love you, man.
yeah.
You know, absolute legend. But were you good close friends with Mike when he won French Open with your brother?
Yeah, Mike had already lived
So,
with us for
right.
8 years
Okay.
at
How
that
cool's
time.
that? How cool's that? 2017, huh?
Yeah, that was pretty special. What, so 2017, he'd already lived with he'd like 10 years actually at that time, you know, because
Wow.
I had 12. He started living with us actually in '05, so 12 years. And then he was always like family right away, you know. And then I say living with us, but he was always basing in the States and then out of
Yeah.
college. So his home was always here in Florida when he needed a place to train, because then his parents had moved back to New Zealand. So he had two homes at that time, but he was in the States a lot more. But
Yeah.
he was always with us. So then that was like, that was incredible to see. And just honestly, even at that time, like Ryan was still a successful singles player, and you know, like 40 at that time. And just like, I remember like my dad was like bawling, crying, watching it, and like back home. Just so even then, I guess my point is there is Michael was only playing doubles. Ryan was so successful in singles, and then just winning like a doubles championship like that. The amount of like joy and gratitude that are just like, just I don't know, just how significant like that moment like could mean to like everybody
Yeah.
that knew them, and you realize that there's a lot to be done from winning a lot of doubles matches.
We need another Harrison Venus Grand Slam title. You know,
Hey,
this is
hey,
Mike's he's a young pup still
yeah,
in mind and body. You know,
yep,
he's don't
yep,
believe the age next to his name. So
exactly,
that's what I'm pushing for one day over the next few
yes,
years. And on the doubles, just to kind of go into doubles, as I think we in this year, of course. But if we go back to firstly 2012, as an 18-year-old, you got a wild card with your brother into US Open and have a run to the quarterfinals. Again, how was that experience? But two, how much did that almost plant a seed in your mind that actually, what, I was doing this at 18. Doubles is a sport that I'm going to be able to make my way in as well.
yeah. I mean, honestly, like we would always play singles and doubles growing up, and then I think always showed us like just the chemistry that you can have to be a good team, and that aspect of doubles that's sometimes you can build with and play well off of. But it showed that, yeah, I felt like it showed me that, like, you know, you can do it. I knew I had a good partner in my brother at the time. But then obviously through the years when I would play doubles, I felt like guys were getting good at it, you know, like everybody's like playing, and you feel like you somehow have no like space to play.
Yeah,
And so then, you know, then sometimes I see that now where there's always this back and forth on double specialist, and you know, all these guys didn't play single, but I'm like, shoot, like, yeah, like we made quarters in 2012 at 18, and like I wasn't even playing doubles like like we didn't play it the right way from how you have to play it now. Otherwise I feel you just like, you know, you aren't like gonna win too many matches. So then for me, I'm always like, yeah, I just feel like, you know, I would play doubles back then. You know, this is 15, 16 years ago, but I just feel like the depth of it and the way that guys are playing now, I feel like it's like improving, and the level of it's going up. And I mean, it's like anything. I feel like the better the level's getting at something, the more appealing it should be to anybody.
yeah. Do you think I actually had I had a bit of a moment earlier this year where, and it was when it was, I think it was maybe Wimbledon. There was a practice set that Mike and Nicola played with you and Evan at Wimbledon over at the courts in
Yep.
and I would say you guys, but then maybe I'm trying to think of the other team that I saw it, that you guys almost started to, and in particular you started also to make me think that Aravello, that was the same day they played a set
Yeah.
with Aravello Pavic, and then they played a set with you and Evan, and it feels like the way you were playing doubles and the way Aravello's playing doubles is almost shifting the sport again a little bit
Yeah.
in terms of, if we think of like a Mektic, or we think of, the positioning, but also the touch and the way that these guys, a lot of these doubles guys were playing, it feels like you Aravello and maybe a few others are almost taking the game to a level of like just full power, that like the
Mhm.
ball is just being hit so hard, serving so big, but hitting so big from the back, maybe a little bit less tactical and a little bit more almost just like ball strike quality. How do you see the doubles has evolved? If we go back to 2012, you've obviously had certain successes along the way at different ages. Do
Yeah.
you and where do you think now doubles is going, and where does it go next, I guess?
I think it's just the level of everything's going to be going up. I think guys, it's going to be more guys that are doing a little bit of both, hitting from the back and also have the skill set at the net, and then also, but doubles is always going to be a team, like how I feel like I was playing this year is just because I knew that I was also playing with a guy who has insanely good ground strokes, so then we can, be back and hit a few more balls at the back, and then you utilize the strengths of the players that you're with, and then so then the other stuff around the net, that's what I'm going to look to continue to improve on, so then it's like if you're playing and your partner's at the back and I'm at the net, just continuing to work on those things to where hopefully I don't have to sit back there and try to just bang the ball around, because you're only having to do that because guys are so good at the net that you feel like it's just if you leave one hung that they're going to do something and knock it off. So that's what forces you to try to learn how to play and adapt differently. Because then when I used to play with Ryan, like he had the power and I was trying to play the ball down and around and over, and then
Yeah.
I kind of adapted that maybe as I just got a little stronger and hit the ball a little harder. But I feel like over time though, that's you're gonna need to develop both. I think doubles is just improving as a whole. Guys are taking it more serious. I feel like guys are 22, 23, 24 out of college and starting to like
Yep.
look to go into it more so the level of it's just naturally going to go up and improve.
Yeah, because any sport, the best at any sport, it's about controlling time and space, right? Messi in soccer, or the best, I'm sure, basketball players, their ability to control those two things. You talked about now. It feels like there's very little space on the and the best players. I did a double session actually with the academy kids today, and I actually showed a video and showed a freeze frame that I use of your partner next year, actually Neal, but
Yep.
with Joe, how in the wall position, they're almost connected in the middle. The
Yep.
way that they're squeezing space and do it incredibly well. And I guess one of the ways of trying to beat the space is by controlling the time. And one of the ways of controlling the time is with power, right? And
Yep.
having just raw power. It's fascinating for me on how this next phase goes actually, because
Yeah.
you are going to get you're going to get more and more people that are. I think we see it in singles, right? The balls are being hit bigger, on a more regular basis with one, the physical specimens that people are, to the strings, the technology, all of those things. I think it's going to be really interesting what happens in doubles in 5 years' time, because I think you go back and you watch videos of the Bryans, who were absolute legends of the game, and I was very fortunate to have had an experience playing them at a Grand Slam back in Wimbledon 2005,
Yeah. How'd you
and
do?
we
How
lost
was
in
it?
yeah, we, you know what, we lost in four
Yeah.
sets, second round,
Hey,
but
it's not bad.
but we actually there was a moment. We had a
Yeah.
moment of being a set up. I think
Hey.
maybe 3-2 up in
Yeah.
the third, and actually feeling like shit. I think we're getting on top. We're on top,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
had 15-40. And
Yeah.
James Auckland, I apologise. I'm not blaming you. I'm not a blamer, but I had a good backhand return single hander, but
Yeah.
I would sit in my backhand grip,
Yeah.
and Bob hit a big serve out wide to me. So I kind of had like a continental forehand. I couldn't change my foot, and I kind of played this kind of grass court
Yeah.
punty forehand right at his feet. And James Auckland went to poach rather than kind of what I like my players to do.
Just go
Maybe
in.
just go and blanket, and he just knocked the volley down the line, and
Yeah.
then he went ace unreturnable, chest bumped Mike, and then 30 minutes later or 35 minutes later we'd lost in 4 sets, and I felt like a bulldozer had kind of like
Yeah.
rolled over us, So we had one moment, that was our
Yeah. One
moment,
moment in there.
and then
But hey, it's not bad right there.
then they were honest, and I dine out on that. That's the only thing I've got, but it was a loss.
Yeah.
But you watch videos of them, and you're like, put the freaking ball away, boys.
Yeah.
It was so much. It has massively evolved even from that era,
From
right?
that area. Yeah. 100%. I feel like guys, it's easy to say like, oh yes, they're on top of the net, like lob them, but also guys have the ability to know how to get in close, knock them off, but you're also watching the grip change, and and you're yes, like the lob can be used effective. That's what the returners have to get good, and work on disguising it, because then the net guys are also getting good at reading when the lob's coming, and immediately moving back, and covering the space, and then guys understand the positioning. It looks like the line's always open, but from where the serve and where the guys are impacting the ball, the line's not really open as much as people. Like, I'll text people and they're always saying, "Oh, go down the line on your
Yeah,
return." I'm like, it's not always there. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
guys are knowing it. Like, the positionings and understanding and reading the shots are also improving as the net player. So then that part of it's getting good. But then obviously guys are closer. So then that's where, if you have the ability to hit through guys and make them lose space, and that's like kind of like the little chess match, like back and forth, where players are adjusting and guys are trying to add tools to their game, I guess.
Absolutely. And just last couple of things before we move in our quick fire round on that. I can't have you on and not talk about your year, right? 2025. I don't know your exact ranking, but 85-90 start of the year. It was impressive. It was again kind of being involved in the tour and seeing it, but like, you could see actually it was in Indian Wells when I think people started to go, shit, these guys are real. Like,
Yeah.
you'd won in Dallas, I think you'd maybe won in Mexico as well, or you'd
Yeah.
had it, then
Yeah.
you turned up and obviously had your big run. I remember speaking to Mate Pavic, and all those guys got you in the semis in Indian Wells, but like they were like, Mate was like, no, these guys are good, like really good, and so talk us through, give us your kind of quick synopsis of 2025.
Honestly, I started 2025 and my goal was, just get the ranking at a point where you're going to get those chances. And then I got a chance early on with Rajiv, and we were able to capitalize and get a lot of points. And then once Evan and I started, we were able to do the same thing pretty quickly. I felt like we played two challengers at the end of 2024, and just love playing together. I felt like we were going to have chances. So it's just a matter of, playing enough together and getting those chances. And honestly, we were able to just capitalize on them right away. From there, it feels surreal. It feels like it's gone by the year really quick. But, we started out initially, it was like, okay, like let's play together for like, these like 4 tournaments, 5 tournaments, and then we'll see how it goes, and then we were doing well, so obviously you just couldn't stop then, and it was pretty cool that we were able to go all the way through and make Turin like we did, because that was something that, like I said, we started out the year just going for 5 weeks.
And that was it, because it was almost like you guys had this incredible first kind of 5 months. Then it
Yeah.
felt the result wise anyway,
Yeah.
it almost felt like, oh, they're gonna blow. They're not quite gonna make Turin, and
Yeah.
then you came strong in the last couple of events to get into Turin as well.
Yeah, we were able to honestly like we won Brussels, which was a big match because we played the number 9 team in the finals, and because we were going to go Stockholm, but then everyone was like, "Oh, these the guys are behind us are in Brussels. Like, do you want to just try to play the same event?"
Nice,
And so then that was he made a great call there,
yeah.
and we had a great week there, and then that helped for what ended up being solidifying, us getting in. So then obviously we were pretty thrilled about that, and we honestly it was a great year all around. We had a lot of success at early, and then but as you know, there's a lot of good teams out there too. So we definitely don't take it for granted. That's for sure.
I have to ask you because you're now a
Yeah.
doubles player, and
Yep.
I've said this for a long time. It's like the doubles tour should be. Netflix got it wrong, following
Yeah.
Zverev and Rune and people like that. They should have followed the doubles players, get the insights to all the conversations. And
Yeah.
I've said for a while, it's like Love Island on steroids. The doubles
Yeah.
tour. Like all of the relationships and it's just part of what it is, right? It's part and parcel of how the doubles world works. It doesn't have to mean that people don't like each other. It's just professional. People move on from relationships, and there's always some at the end of the year you're a bit shocked at. You're like, well, hold on, they've made the tour finals. I've had it with this year with my girls, Gabby Dabrowski, Erin Routliffe. People, I'm sure a lot of people are like, why that they've just won the US Open? What are they doing? Why do we see so many teams split up, do you think, every year? What is it in the doubles world that makes it difficult for it's very rare that you see partnerships last longer than 2 years, really, unless maybe they're childhood friends or they've got some different connection. Why do you think that is?
You just spend so much time. I think also with just the player. Sometimes it's logistics reasons, like you might want to spend a little bit more time, switch. Oh, this person's living closer to me. We're more similar, or hey, I'm more similar in age. It could be so many different factors. There's not always necessarily like a problem. I think for teams splitting up, sometimes I've seen it where guys are just like, you know what, like I want to play with somebody from my country, or I want to play with this person. They live a little bit more closer, or I think my game's just going to match up better with this person. I feel like we're both good players. We got a lot of potential, then that's sometimes it's just, it just depends,
Yeah.
and then sometimes it's just, hey, they weren't getting along, like there's no hiding that. And some reasons on some teams too. And it's just, there's no one factor, honestly.
It's a relatively short career as well, right? That's what I always feel as well with the doubles players. It's like there's not a long period of time potentially to be at that ranking to make the money while they can.
Oh, 100%. It's a short career. And then this is, like I said, like we were in such a good position that we created for ourselves for this year. And, you just, like I said, there's sometimes there's just no reason for teams splitting up other than you just one person wants to play with somebody else that they've known for a long time, that became available. That you got to remember too, at the end of a lot of years, sometimes guys will switch or stay together because the person they want isn't available, who is like might be their good friend or somebody that they really get along with. And then sometimes a team might split up that you don't expect to, just because somebody else is available that's a close friend. Like there's so many different factors I think that goes into it, that it would have been nice for Netflix, yeah, to follow that. There'd be a lot of good drama here and there, I'm sure, with some people.
They would, and I have to ask you about
Yeah,
2026. Obviously,
yeah.
Neal Skupski, good friend of mine, LSU, another LSU boy. Neal is also probably. I think I need to double check this, but I think he's the most the most capped guest on Control the Controllables. He's been on maybe 6 or 7 times.
Okay.
So it's you coming on as well kind of cements the Control the Controllables theme.
Hmm.
How are you feeling about that partnership? Obviously, we've heard a lot about Joe Salisbury taking a bit of a mental health break for the
Hmm.
first part of the year. How did that come about with Neal, and how you're looking forward to starting 2026 with him?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Joe's taking some time away. So you feel for Joe. Obviously, he's one of the most respected guys out there. I think, especially on the double side, just true professional. So it's pretty impressive that he's doing as well as he has, but he just knows what he needs. And so I think
Yeah.
everybody's thinking about Joe, but for Neil and I, just he became was just great friends, honestly. I've known him for a long time, and sometimes, it just kind of worked out that Evan and I were switching up, and then Neil was available, and so I feel like I kind of looked into it, and just looking forward to playing with him.
So are you the switcher? You're moving to Juice side?
Yes, I am. Yeah, because also I've always played deuce side more so,
Okay.
and then so Neil's obviously good on the ad. Seems like he's only played on the ad side. The deuce side is what I'm most comfortable on. I find I just always played it growing up, and then
Real tennis players can play
yeah,
both sides, Christian.
they say that too. Of course, you can adjust, but every real tennis player has a forehand or backhand preference too, So then there's always a preference on somebody's going to have a strength or weakness, and I think that they say that, but I think there's going to be certain players that are a little bit better on one side or the other. You're gonna have your preferences, so I'll be switching sides to the do side. So I'm looking forward to that for sure.
And how do you handle? So let's say I'm not delving into your agreement with Neil, but
Yeah,
as time gets closer to Monte Carlo, when Joe's talking about coming back, I'm not saying anything that's not been said in the public. That you're playing with Neil. Obviously, Joe I think has come out himself and even said he understands if you guys are doing great, Neil's not going to be available, right?
yeah.
Does that add a little layer of pressure for you, knowing that there's this, and apologies if I'm putting it into your head, but giving you that little kind of time pressure of, right, we've got this period of time to make it work. Otherwise, there's a 5-time Grand Slam champion kind of waiting in the wings.
Yeah, no, not at all. Because that's enough time. Like, if you're doing well, you're not gonna switch up mid-season, and if you're not doing well, you're gonna switch up mid-season anyway. Because that's like the time that if guys and new partnerships haven't started well, that they would be looking to switch up. So for most of the viewers, yeah, that's what how it normally works. New partnerships. It's like, hey, you try it for a couple months, then that would be the time to switch around. But nobody's gonna change while middle of the year when you're winning a lot of matches like that. So I know that Neil knows that. Yeah, so no pressure there, but yeah, it's obviously stuff that we've talked about and discussed as well.
Well, I think it's a good place for us to end before we jump into the quick fire round. But I
Yeah,
just want to say, Christian, before we do, just thank you for your time.
yeah,
And I've had some conversations with you over the last 12 months, obviously around Mike, but you're always someone that I've wanted to delve into more chats with, not just on a
yeah.
camera, because you're a delightful young man. I wish you all the very best. I want nothing but the best for you and Neil next year, and a big thank you for coming onto the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Are you ready for our quick fire round?
Yes,
What does control the controllables mean to you?
it just means that control everything that's in your hands. Tennis has so many things that you're reacting to. What your opponent's doing, what somebody's done to you the night before, but what you can always control is your mindset and how you choose to respond to the situations that are happening.
Who had the highest doubles ranking career high, yourself or your big bro?
I think myself.
I said early on in our chat, I said, remember that number, the
Yep.
number 15. Do you know
15.
what your brother's career high was?
I don't.
16.
Okay. Yes. There we go. The reason why I thought mine got slightly higher was just because I knew they qualified for Turin but won a slam, but I knew that him and Michael started playing later in the year, and so I just was thinking about that.
So you, not that I'm trying to create a rivalry, but you've just
Yeah,
pipped
yeah.
him.
I'll let
What's
him
your
know.
what's your craziest ever tennis story, tournament story?
Ooh, craziest tournament story. Yeah, normally I'm pretty good at coming up with one there. I don't have one that's striking out at me right now. There's a lot of like drawing a blank on that one. Can I skip it?
You can skip it.
I'm
What's your
sorry.
what's your favorite snack?
Oh, my favorite snack are Oreos.
Pre-match?
Pre-match, I would say I love Skittles if I'm gonna like snack on something I shouldn't.
Hey mate, the amount of energy that you burn up, you can eat
Yeah,
whatever crap that you need.
yeah.
Um, what is one pre-match routine that you refuse to skip, no matter what?
Just whenever it starts at the beginning of the day, but it's just but right before the match is tying my left shoe first, always before my right shoe when I go to put my shoes on.
I like
That's
it.
the only thing that's like I'm like I got to do this one for sure.
Don't tell your opponents that. Someone
Yeah,
might have something up their sleeve.
yeah.
What's your unpopular tennis opinion?
My unpopular tennis opinion, I would say like just about any kind of sports or like anything.
Anything.
My unpopular tennis opinion is Peyton Manning is better than Tom Brady. Be, I don't care about the rings. I just think Manning always had Brady had a better team. So I think that like no one ever agrees with me, but I think Peyton Manning's better than Brady.
But hey, we're going with it.
Yeah.
I'm not here to disagree. What's one moment in your career when you knew that you proved somebody wrong or you proved people wrong that felt good?
Um, I would say honestly, just probably this year, for sure, because it was, I had a lot of people that weren't my family, but then people I knew in tennis that had told me to stop playing. And, by that time you become 29, 30, where tennis, you're used to having people around, but people will always almost like overshare. You get used to people kind of like talking to you. It could be casual fans or just people, parents you barely know, but they're a little bit older, so you kind of respect, but they try to give you like guidance on how to live your life. And at that time was when people were starting to tell you, stop playing and this and that, looking at things. So this year, 100%, because there's a time where you're old enough to where you feel like you should be doing something well. There's that pressure, but it's also, the time where you're not 21, 22, and if people tell you stop playing, where you're like, you know what, I got time. You're more like, you know what, there's a lot of people that have tried to like influence your opinion to do something else that just wasn't meant for you. You had a tough road, whatever. But yeah, I just never wanted to listen to that.
Well done. If you could steal one shot from another player in history and add it to your game, what would it be and why?
John Isner's serve, because I think it's the best shot in the history of tennis.
You'd win some doubles matches with that
Yeah,
serve, wouldn't you? You know.
yeah.
Roger or Rafa?
I always loved Roger. I just liked the way he played. I just I loved watching Roger play.
Serena or Venus? You must have hit with those girls a bit, huh?
I no, I've
Were
actually
you
never
were you
hit with
after?
him. It's just like I like Venus. I pick her only just because I feel like she just always like seems so supportive. Like Serena won so much and just dominated for so long. So I'm like, you know what, Serena's got that going for her. But Venus also like found a way too. Like that, I just seemed like she just always seemed like even happier than Serena when Serena won
Yeah.
somehow. And I always like, yeah, I really admire that about her.
Can't believe you went for the older sibling.
Yeah, but you
You know.
gotta sometimes the older siblings sometimes have it tough too.
And the medical timeout or not?
No, I don't agree. Yeah, I would say no medical timeout.
Why?
Just because you've started the match, I think sometimes the rule gets abused. And I think once you've started the match, like any serious injury, you're not going to fix.
Yeah.
within 3 minutes. You know, injuries take a long time to heal, and there's no injury that you're gonna fix within 3 minutes. You know, they're just impossible unless it's like, you know, something where it's like an obvious like scrape where somebody's bleeding that, you know, that just needs to wrap up.
Yeah.
But if it's like for injury of like something that's like my knee or this or that, like I just, yeah, I think you're not going to really fix an injury within 3 minutes.
I'm with you. 90% of tennis players say yes, you should have it that have come on this podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm with you.
Yeah.
What's one rule change you would have in tennis?
I would say no lets, because you don't play them once the points started.
I agree with that one,
Yeah.
especially in,
Yeah.
obviously colleges got it, Tennis
Yeah.
Europe, ITF Juniors,
All the
all those
ways to
things.
speed up the game too. And there's so many times I'm stretching, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna hold this position till after like the point, and then it's a let, and I'm like, damn, now I gotta go another 30 seconds.
I see how your brain works.
Yeah.
I do that in the gym sometimes on a match, or I'll stop on this machine when the set finishes.
Oh
You can
my.
guarantee it's like a 14-12 in the third.
Yeah.
And my last question: who should our next guest be on Control the Controllables?
I say Robert Cash because I like him a lot. He was part of a very successful team this year with Tracy. I think Robert Cash, if I'm not mistaken, could have gone to medical school,
Okay.
I believe, and I believe he's put it on hold or something. I'll have to get the details on that, but from what I've heard, I believe, and he
We'll get
did,
the details on here. You hook it
and
up. You set it
yeah,
up. I'll find out. I'll find
and
out
he's
all about his
playing,
medical.
choosing to play doubles, which has been seen as the less, you know, way to go, like in tennis. But what he also could have chosen to do right out of school, you know, would have been very successful. So obviously I think has a lot of insights to figure out what's given him so much joy about playing doubles, and he's so good at it. I think that would be a great person to talk to.
Awesome. We will be in touch to see if you can hook that up for us. Christian, you're an absolute star. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So there we have it, our last guest of 2025, and what a great way to go out. And before I move on to wish you guys a big Merry Christmas, it's just about saying what a brilliant guest Christian was. You know, I've got to know him quite well over 2025. He talked there quite candidly about his relationship with Michael Venus, who I coached for the majority of 2025. And I always think in the tennis world, when you've got a player that one is the level of Christian, you know, he's a fantastic tennis player. And if you ever get a chance to watch him, the serious ball speed comes off his racket. He's a good looking boy. He's got a lot of things going in his favor. Yeah, he holds that thing that we all value so much, just humility in everything he does. He's one of the hardest workers on the tour. And to hear his story, all the injuries that he's come back from, to have that relationship as well, I think with his brother's quite special, you know, because it's very easy, I think, to feel a little bit like you're inferior when you have a brother who was such a high level as a junior. But I think all of those things sum Christian up extremely well. And then for British tennis fans, it's exciting because they get to watch him alongside Neal Skupski, certainly for the first part of 2026. And I have no doubt that they will be a formidable pair on the ATP Tour this year. So a big thanks for Christian. He's someone I'd love to get on again down the line because I think he's got so many different angles that we can get to with Christian and so many learnings to take from it. But wherever you are in the world, wishing you a fantastic festive period with your family, with your friends, and we will be back with lots more podcasts in 2026. Thank you for all of your support. But until next time, I'm Dan Kiernan, and we are Control the Controllables.